In a series called House of the Dragon and in a civil war called The Dance of the Dragons, obviously the actual dragons are vitally important. However, some dragons are a bit more important than others. Certain major players like Caraxes and Vhagar have already played starring roles in House of the Dragon's first season, but this era of Targaryen history actually began as the height of their power and became the beginning of their end. And the heights and collapse of their strength really rested on the dragons that they had and lost during Rhaenyra and Aegon's battle for the throne. But who were the weakest and most powerful dragons alive during this time of massive upheaval for House Targaryen? And more importantly, which side of the battle were these weapons of war actually on? However, before we get into that, I'd like to take a minute to talk about the sponsor for today's video, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is a virtual private network that keeps your information encrypted and protected, and it allows you to use the internet however you want, whenever you want. One of Surfshark VPN's best features allows you to set your location to anywhere in the world, which grants you access to the TV and movie content of streaming services across the globe. For example, The Office is probably my favorite sitcom of all time, so I was gutted when NBC pulled the series from Netflix in the US. But with Surfshark VPN, all I need to do is set my location to Canada instead of the United States, and voila, I'm watching the cringiest dinner party of all time again. With Surfshark VPN, you can access hundreds of movies and TV shows that aren't available in your country for a fraction of the price of one streaming service. And it also protects your IP address, keeps your information private, blocks ads, and enables you to use the internet safely anywhere at any time. Surfshark also offers a 30-day money-back guarantee, so try it risk-free and sign up for Surfshark VPN now at surfshark.deal/alive and enter the promo code ALIVE for 83% off and 3 extra months for free. Although the Dance of the Dragons only lasted for a few years, there were a total of 21 dragons living in Westeros during that time, and their power ranged from functionally useless to a literal weapon of mass destruction. This is every dragon alive during the Dance of the Dragons, ranked from weakest to most powerful. Number 20. Morning. Coming in at dead last as the weakest dragon in the Dance of the Dragons is Morning. If you've never heard of Morning, don't worry, because this dragon is actually born during the Dance of the Dragons, which should give you an idea of how useful and important she is within the Civil War. The most relevant aspect of Morning's existence is the fact that she exists. Number 19. Shrykos and Morgul. These two dragons are bonded to Jaehaerys and Jaehaera Targaryen, the twin son and daughter of Aegon and Helaena. So, while their names sound really cool, they are functionally useless in the Dance of the Dragons. Not only are they baby dragons, they are bonded to baby humans, so they can't really serve as weapons of war by the time the Greens and the Blacks are battling one another. Number 18. Stormcloud. In that same vein, Stormcloud is the dragon who is bonded with Aegon Targaryen III, son of Rhaenyra and Daemon. A young dragon that belongs to a young child, Stormcloud only has a slight edge because he's a few years older than Shrykos and Morgul. Number 17. Grey Ghost. Although House of the Dragon hasn't delved into it yet, one interesting element of the Dance of the Dragons is that there are actually wild dragons that haven't been claimed or tamed by anyone by the time the war begins. Grey Ghost is arguably the least important of the bunch, though. An appropriately named dragon, Grey Ghost lives on Dragonstone but avoids humans as much as possible, so not much is known about it beyond the fact that it exists. Number 16. Tyraxes. Tyraxes is the dragon belonging to Joffrey Valerian, the youngest son of Rhaenyra Targaryen and Harwin Strong. Although he has an edge over the other claimed dragons in terms of age, Joffrey is barely old enough to ride and Tyraxes is barely old enough to be ridden. So at this point, there's not much they can do to impact the war. Number 15. Arrax. As many well know, Arrax was the dragon belonging to Lucerys Valerian. Although Arrax was obviously more powerful than some other living dragons of the era, the only relevant thing that the dragon or rider actually contributes to the Dance of the Dragons is dying. Number 14. Vermax. Vermax is the dragon who belongs to Jaehaerys Valerian, Rhaenyra's oldest son. While he is at least large enough to be ridden and taken into battle, he's hardly any competition for most of the other dragons in the war. Number 13. Moondancer. Moondancer has yet to be seen on House of the Dragon, but she is the dragon who is bonded to Baela Targaryen, Daemon and Laena's daughter who actually has a dragon. Although she's around 2 years younger than Vermax, the impact that she ultimately has on the war overall is arguably more relevant than Vermax's. Number 12. Targaryen. Targaryen and her rider Daeron haven't even been acknowledged in House of the Dragon yet, but Daeron is Alicent and Viserys' youngest son, and Targaryen is his she-dragon. Both Daeron and Targaryen are around the same age as Jace and Vermax. But again, the amount of impact that Targaryen has in the Dance of the Dragons is far greater than that of Vermax. Number 11. Sunfire. Coming in at number 11 is Aegon the Elder's dragon, Sunfire. Again, being a few years older gives Sunfire the extra edge over many other dragons. And although plenty of dragons are bigger and more powerful, Sunfire still has a huge impact on the dance. And fun fact, this dragon's golden color is what inspired the black and gold Targaryen sigil sported by the Greens. Number 10. Sheepstealer. Yet another wild dragon. Sheepstealer is unclaimed and untamed at the start of the Dance of the Dragons, but he is old enough and powerful enough to compete with a lot of the tame dragons in battle. Sheepstealer was supposedly born when King Jaehaerys was still young, meaning that Sheepstealer could actually be almost 100 years old. Number 9. Syrax. Although Rhaenyra's dragon is old enough that she can beat more than half of the dragons that are alive during the dance, Syrax still doesn't compare to a lot of the older dragons that are still alive in this era. However, what does make her exceptionally interesting is how many dragon eggs that she laid. Morning is the only confirmed dragon that came from one of Syrax's eggs, but she is also likely the mother of Vermax, Arax, and Tyraxes. Number 8. Cannibal. Cannibal is the most powerful of the wild dragons, and his name should explain why. He is the oldest wild dragon alive during the dance. He's likely been alive for at least a century, and he often ate dragon eggs as well as other dragons. So clearly, in a war between dragons, Cannibal could be a powerful threat in favor of whatever side can claim him. Number 7. Sea Smoke. Sea Smoke is the first of an interesting class of dragons, as he is a tame dragon who has had a rider, but is unclaimed at the start of the Dance of the Dragons. House of the Dragon has put Sea Smoke in a strange position too, because wild dragons supposedly won't take another rider as long as their current rider is alive. The narrative change that made Laenor's death a fake-out instead of the real thing also makes Sea Smoke's status confusing. Regardless though, Sea Smoke is a pretty powerful dragon. Although still on the young side, in House of the Dragon, Sea Smoke was clearly used as a weapon in the war for the Stepstones. So when the dance begins in the TV series, he is one of the few dragons who actually has any battle experience. Number 6. Meleys. Also known as the Red Queen, Meleys was the dragon of Rhaenys Targaryen at the time of the dance. But Rhaenys was not Meleys' first rider. She was also ridden by Princess Alyssa Targaryen. And although Meleys' age is currently unconfirmed, just by virtue of the fact that she was alive in Princess Alyssa's era, she is likely at least twice as old as nearly every dragon mentioned prior, thus considerably larger and more powerful than most of the dragons that lived during the Civil War. Number 5. Caraxes. Caraxes is the dragon belonging to Daemon Targaryen, but again, Daemon was not his first rider. Prince Aemon Targaryen actually claimed Caraxes in 72 AC, and although Caraxes' age is as yet unconfirmed, he was a young dragon at this time. Clearly, what makes Caraxes incredibly dangerous is not just his age relative to most of the other dragons in the dance, but the fact that he is extremely experienced in battle. As we've seen on House of the Dragon, Caraxes was key in the War for the Stepstones, a war that lasted for almost 10 years according to the book canon. But even prior to that, his first rider Aemon took Caraxes to Dorne to fight in the Fourth Dornish War. There might be older and bigger dragons, but when it comes to actual battle, Caraxes is incredibly tough to beat. Number 4. Silverwing. Silverwing was a she-dragon originally ridden by Queen Alysanne Targaryen, but by the time the Dance of the Dragons begins, she is unclaimed. Silverwing was born somewhere between 36 AC and 42 AC. Meaning that by the time the Civil War starts, she is one of the oldest living dragons and almost 100 years old. So based on size and age alone, this unclaimed dragon is a massive threat. Number 3. Dreamfire. Currently bonded to Helaena Targaryen, Dreamfire is another ancient she-dragon who is interestingly suspected to be the dragon who laid the eggs that Daenerys Targaryen eventually hatched. And given how dangerous Drogon, Viserion, and Rhaegal are, it should come as no surprise that Dreamfire is extremely powerful. And although Dreamfire's age is unconfirmed, she was large enough to ride in 35 AC, so she is likely the second oldest living dragon at the time of the dance in 129 AC. Number 2, Vermithor. Although Dreamfire might arguably be more powerful than Vermithor during the era of the Dance of the Dragons, Vermithor ultimately has a greater impact on the war overall. Originally written by Jaehaerys Targaryen, it is suspected that Vermithor was born alongside King Jaehaerys, making him approximately 95 years old by the time of the dance. And although Vermithor is unclaimed by the time the war begins, House of the Dragon clearly indicates that Daemon has access to and some kind of relationship with Vermithor. Number 1, Vhagar. Clearly, no dragon in existence throughout the Dance of the Dragons could even hold a candle to the grandma from hell, Vhagar. While every other dragon in the war was born decades after Aegon's conquest, Vhagar was born 50 years prior to the Targaryen invasion of Westeros. She's approximately 80 to 90 years older than the second oldest living dragon at the time, and she is literally 10 times the age of many of the dragons that go to war in the dance. But what makes Vhagar even more unimaginably dangerous is her experience. Caraxes is arguably the second most battle-hardened dragon in the dance via the War for the Stepstones. But in comparison, Vhagar was used to conquer an entire continent. And even after Aegon's conquest, Vhagar has been used in battle or used as a weapon of mass destruction many times. Vhagar is essentially a general who fought in World War II who is the size of an Airbus A380 and can vomit fire over an entire city. Literally no dragon alive can compare, and she is not only the most powerful dragon in the Dance of the Dragons by a long shot, she is arguably the second most powerful dragon that House Targaryen ever had. Otto was not kidding when he said that Vhagar was worth 10,000 times the price that Aemond paid to claim her. So, this lineup leaves the Dance of the Dragons in an interesting state, especially around the time that House of the Dragons' first season concluded. The Blacks had control of 8 dragons at the time of Aegon II's coronation, while the Greens only had 6. However, what makes things really interesting is that there are essentially 6 unclaimed dragons that are completely up for grabs, which is obviously enough to swing the power differential heavily in one direction or the other. Also, while the Blacks have the superior dragon numbers, they arguably don't have the superior dragon power. A lot of their dragons are sort of in the middle of the pack, and even their best dragon barely cracks the top 5 in terms of raw strength. And while the Greens have a few of the weakest dragons, they also have Vhagar and Dreamfire, who are almost indisputably more powerful than every single black dragon, and whose combined strength is arguably greater than every dragon that the Blacks have control over. But again, what makes the start of the Civil War interesting is that a little less than a third of all the living dragons in existence don't have riders by the time that Vhagar and Aemond kill Arrax and Luke. And while Caraxes is the only dragon that the Blacks have control over at that point, who is within the top 5 most formidable dragons, there are 2 dragons in that top 5 who don't have riders either. Dragons were the forces used to create a civilization that dominated the world for years. So once they became the force that subjugated Westeros under Targaryen rule, the only thing that could really beat them was each other. Which is why the Dance of the Dragons ultimately destroyed this species and destroyed the true power of House Targaryen. House of the Dragon made this clear from the jump, but they have only started to scratch the surface of the actual dragons that are the driving force behind this conflict. And clearly, some dragons are much more powerful forces than others. But what do you think? Is this ranking accurate, or are some dragons better or worse than their rank? Leave your comments and opinions below, and if you're interested in more content like this, like and subscribe.